Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the OSR Tabletop live stream with DM Bluddworth. As you can see, I'm actually on vacation. I am in Nassau, the Bahamas, and figured I'd try to test out doing a live stream directly from wherever I happen to be, in case I'm at a convention or, in this case, on vacation. And I figured that what I would try to do is wrap up all of this week's worth of RPG a day. So I'm going to start doing these on a more weekly basis, unless I am in fact, home and able to set them up, one by one. So this is RPG a day 2022, the weekly edition. So I am covering days 8 through day 13 or 14, today being day 14. So day 8, going to who introduced you to RPGs? So my very first dungeon master was, a young boy, same age as us, all in the same grade, so age 10 or 11. Name is Shayana. His family was from India, and he was our introduction to the to Dungeons and Dragons, and he is currently now like a corporate lawyer, does a lot of international work between obviously the United States and India. And, I speak to him from time to time, through Facebook and everything. But, we are separated by, close to 40 years and continents. So it becomes a little bit difficult to kind of keep those lines of communication going. But like I said, I still do chat with him on Facebook from time to time. So he was our introduction. Myself, my friends Adam and Steve, and later on it was David or Cam Fei Chan, who was also one of our from time to time players. But primarily it was Shayna, myself, Adam, and Steven. So that's who introduced us. I'm not quite sure which box set he had. This is going back to 77 or 78. So I want to say it was most likely either the Holmes edition or, or possibly Moldvay, but I really don't recall. I don't think it was the white box, although that's also a possibility as well. All right, so that's pretty much day 8. I am now going to move on to day 9's prompt. So day 9 is what was the second RPG you bought? All right, so the first one I bought was the Mold Bay box. So that was my, the magenta box set. That was my first purchase. And then the second would most likely have been, if it wasn't for some of the books that I might have bought for AD&D First Edition, or it could possibly have been either, it could have been Star Frontiers, and it might have actually been Call of Cthulhu, which would have been in its second or third edition at that point. So this is looking at around like 1981 or 82. Probably not 83, probably not that late. So I'm kind of fuzzy on exactly which game system it was, because we didn't just play one, we played multiple game systems, multiple genres, and that's basically what we did. And when we came across a genre and a game system that matched that genre that we really liked, we stuck with it. So when we started playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, that was our fantasy genre and our fantasy game that we played. We tried a few others here and there, but only sporadically, like Sword Bearer, which was Fantasy Grounds Unlimited. And that was pretty, I guess we played GURPS a little bit later on, but it was mostly focused on just the Conan GURPS that I played and ran, and not regular GURPS, fantasy, but just very specifically Conan GURPS. So yeah, that was my second RPG, and like I said, I really don't remember if it was Star Frontiers or Call of Cthulhu. It certainly wasn't Twilight 2000. That came a little bit later on as well. So these are just the games that I purchased, not the ones that that I was playing at the time. Day 10. So day 10 would have been Wednesday's prompt. When did you start game mastering? Again, I started game mastering later on. I started in 77 or 78, and I started game mastering around, I want to say 82 or possibly 83. I was certainly the game master for Twilight 2000. I occasionally game mastered Call of Cthulhu, Star Frontiers, and no, Adam did Gangbusters, and Adam did James Bond 007. Shayna, our first game master, only did Dungeons and Dragons, and when we started playing, he only did AD&D First Edition. He never dabbled in any of these other game systems. And when Adam took over as our group dungeon master, he kind of took over the AD&D, and I was, I was doing some of the other things. Shayna actually stopped playing with us because he skipped high school, and he went straight to college from high school, so from 8th grade. So, or even 9th grade might have been junior high school for us at the time. So he skipped 10, 11, and 12, and he went right to college. So that's when he shifted out, and that would have been around 82 or 83 when he stopped playing as frequently with us, and certainly stopped game mastering or dungeon mastering for us. So I'm going to move on to, so I started around 82, maybe 83, and definitely Twilight 2000 and definitely Star Frontiers were two games that I was game mastering. Oh, wrong one. So day 11. If you could live in a game setting, where would it be? All of the game settings that, I've played over these years are pretty frightening places. I mean, Greyhawk is probably the tamest of them, and it's still a pretty brutal world. For just the greatest amount of excitement that I would go with is probably Conan's Hyborian Age. Again, very brutal world setting. None of the places were for the timid of heart. In any of the situations or any of the genres that we were playing with. I mean, Call of Cthulhu, would you really want to live in, Innsmouth in the 1920s in a Call of Cthulhu setting? These were pretty drastic places. Or, James Bond was just, the fantasy spy novels and, in the real world. So we kind of live in that one. Twilight 2000 was, war-torn, Eastern Europe, and it was, it was pretty bad. So I wouldn't want to live in that kind of a setting, which is, practically post-apocalyptic as well. So I would go with Hyborian Age. I think that one would be the real world setting, very brutal, kind of light magic, considered a low magic setting, and pretty cool stuff. Let's see. I know I didn't prompt anybody or let anybody know that I was going to do this, so I don't know if there's anyone watching. It appears that maybe one person is watching. I'll see if there's any comments in this section. I will bounce back and forth and see, and I'm going to try to keep this fairly short anyway. Because like I said, I'm on vacation and just trying to squeeze this into our day. Why did you start RPGing? Again, it's kind of, I started young, so I started at, either, 10 or 11 years old, so 77 or 78. Um, I wasn't a very good reader in elementary school. I actually had a reading teacher in fifth and sixth grade, and he was mainly just trying to, I know Mr. Sneed, I'll never forget his name, and he was originally just trying to teach me how to read faster. My comprehension was very good, so what I could read in that time frame was very strong, and my interest in reading was still there too. I was just very slow, very plodding, as I read, and I had to go back and reread and do everything. Just took a lot more time. So once I started picking up, um, and I don't remember the order in which this happened. It was either I started playing Dungeons and Dragons and then I started reading Robert E. Howard and Lord of the Rings and such, or it was, I definitely read Lord of the Rings in seventh grade, because seventh grade I ended up going to summer school. And just before summer school, we were on a family vacation and I read The Hobbit and the three Lord of the Rings novels all in that one week. So just voracious reading. It just took me, I spent the entire vacation just reading. So I would say that's really what started me in the hobby, or at least certainly kept me grounded in the hobby, was the fact that, I knew I wasn't a strong reader, and this was high, very high interest. And it's something as a former school teacher, we used to talk about, if you want to get kids engaged in reading, you don't give them the book that's on the bookshelf in your classroom. You let them pick out their own book from wherever it comes from, and let them read that first, and let them just focus on, the things that they have a high interest in. And that's the way that you build up their reading capacity, whether it be their speed in reading or just the number of pages that they can read and still comprehend along the way. So, that's what I would say. It's a connection with literacy. It's a connection with, wanting to become a better reader. So day 13, almost caught up to today. So this would have been yesterday. And how would you change the way you started RPGing? I don't really know. That's kind of a weird way of, asking the question, because it started the way it started. I wouldn't think of any other way that it could have started differently. It was introduced to me from a friend, whom I consider to be my best friend at the time. I mean, we were all very, very close friends. It was, the 3-4 of us. We were pretty much best friends from early on in elementary school, second grade, all the way up through high school, or until we at least graduated at various times. So certainly I couldn't think of a better way to enter into the hobby than what I did. And finally, suggest a new RPG for your friends to try. Now, I changed this question a little bit from what it originally was, and I don't have the original here today. So I would suggest for fantasy that you should definitely give Castles and Crusades a try. If you want to get that old school feel, especially like an AD&D first edition feel, but in a game system that uses more modernized mechanics and certainly layout and streamlined and all of that is top notch. Art is top notch stuff. Then I would go with that. You should definitely try Modiphius's 2D20 system, and I would recommend Conan 2D20. Love that system. It's really exciting, really action-packed, and just the flow of that goes along. You should absolutely try Call of Cthulhu. If you haven't tried that, that is the second most popular game system in the world, is Call of Cthulhu. I mean, many times people talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, it's the top game. It's the top game system in the United States. And once you leave the United States, it's no longer the top game system. It's just that the consumerism here, is where it's getting its blast out on, how popular it is. But once you leave the United States, that disappears, and you start seeing other game systems like Call of Cthulhu or Dragon Warrior or other game systems that here in the United States, I mean, we all know Call of Cthulhu, but Dragon Warrior was kind of like a, for those of us that are in the hobby as deep as some of us are, we've heard of it, we know about it, we probably never ran it, but we're aware of it, and we're aware that it is more popular, in other places. Free League and Modifius are really pushing a lot of different IPs out there, and really exposing a lot of people to different types of gaming and everything. So I would just branch out as much as you possibly can, especially across various genres, and and really build up a good sense of what the hobby is producing. I do have a comment here. So OG Talislanta was a blast with the boys back in high school. All right. So, and Talislanta is another one I've been hearing more and more about. So I'll actually put that up there. Hello, Worst Cat. Sorry I didn't give any notice whatsoever of this live stream. I'm on vacation, so I was just testing this out to see. Now you've confirmed that it's actually coming out there, and hopefully you're getting sound and the stream is working fine. So good to see you there. I currently cannot live stream to Facebook, so I'll have to wait until this is done recording, and then once I get home, I'll be able to share it on Facebook. I got into a little trouble on Facebook, so right now I'm currently like on a 30-day ban from Facebook as far as being able to live stream or advertise on Facebook. So if you do hear this and you enjoy this live stream, be sure to share it out as much as you can, since I can't at least on Facebook. So and Worst Cat, if there's anything that you want to add to the list, like your your first or your second purchase, or any of these prompts that I went through for this week, you're certainly welcome to do so as well. And let me go back to my banners and see. So yep, so that's pretty much it. So that is my wrap up of days 8 through 14, kind of made up for this whole week. Since I was pretty much unavailable from Thursday on, and even prior to that, I was super busy getting ready for this vacation, and so wasn't able to get here. And I got to double check my cell phone because I heard a buzzing, and I'm wondering if I just got sent a message. A missed call. All right, so garbage. So yeah, that's the good thing about vacation, is that you don't have to pay attention to missed calls. So I was just double checking to make sure it wasn't the wife and family trying to reach out to me. So other than that, I guess I will shift off of this since we're only about 19 minutes through, and hopefully this format is actually a lot better, because I was spending about 7 to 10 minutes on each of these prompts, and I think this is a much better way of formatting it out there. Hey, Ducato, how's it going? I am testing out the live stream. That's why I wasn't able to just throw it out there, put up a prompt as to which was, when I was going to run this. I'm on vacation, obviously. I'm in Nassau, the Bahamas, and just came up from the beach. And I usually come in around like 2 o'clock, 2:30, and take a little rest, and then get prepared for a night of eating and gambling. So last night was a pretty good gambling night. So I walked out with twice as much as I went in with, and that's always the best thing to do. And so, but I was just going through my catching up with the RPG a day comments, and I know there's been a lot of other stuff going on, but let me jump back to Worst Cat here. So first purchase was second edition AD&D. Would do 100 times again, though we also explored the Kevin Smeaton's world of Robotech and Macross. Yeah, I was, to be honest with you, I was never a big Robotech fan. I know a lot of my friends were. I mean, Robotech was huge during my junior high and high school years, mostly the high school years. Robotech was really big. I was more into, Star Blazers earlier on, and and that would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. Whenever the cartoon hit, the Saturday morning cartoons, I loved Star Blazers, and I love G-Force, and there was G-Force, there was Voltron. There was a lot of, obviously Transformers came out. There was a lot of those things. Power Rangers came out much later. That was more my younger brother's, his generation's, worth of cartoons and action, kids, Saturday morning stuff. Obviously I watched Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon in the early 80s or early to mid 80s, and was never a Lionheart. What was that? Thundercats. Again, that was my younger brother. Yeah, yeah. Art just brought it up. Thundercats. That was also around the same time. Yes, thank you, Ducato, and it's nice to have a vacation, especially since I just retired. I'm still not fully into retirement mode yet. So this is like a typical vacation for, my family and I. There's about 30 of us here. So it's not like a relaxing vacation, but it's certainly, a good vacation to, try to unwind and just take a little break from everything. So I ran my second group session of Castles and Crusades yesterday. Yeah, and I was starting to watch the video of that. I got to finish that up. I was too busy gambling last night and winning, so I will get back to your video. But I'm super impressed with the table that you have laid out for that and everything. I mean, that's massive stuff. I mean, that's really cool. Table you have set up for everything with all of those terrain features, and that's far beyond my capacity to either paint that stuff. Certainly, I have 1,000 unpainted miniatures. I was never a good painter, and I have them, but I don't actually use them. But yeah, your setup is awesome. Hey, Lionel, how's it going? Again, this was kind of like an impromptu live stream. I'm away on vacation, and I wasn't quite sure that this would actually work. I was pretty much thinking that I wouldn't be able to record and then upload it afterwards, because iPads really don't work well for that anyway. So we'll see. We'll see how it comes out in the end. Yes, I'm sure your players are really enjoying it. It's making me like jealous. I want to get back off of vacation so that I could finish reading up the Codex of the world setting, the aired world setting, and then uh, about a week after that, start thinking about the players' characters and what kind of a campaign I'm looking to run. And then I would say probably around September, early September, I'll actually be looking to start up a campaign and see, what time slot I'm going to find for it, and, how long we're going to run it. For one of my players yesterday, it was his first experience with CNC. He and I grew up playing AD&D together. He loved CNC. Yeah, CNC is an awesome system, super simple, very flexible. Stephen Chenault was on my channel the other day, and spent about 2 hours just talking about Castles and Crusades specifically, but just gaming, and we had so much in common. It was really incredible how much we actually had in common, and then where he's looking to take Castles and Crusades forward, and how he's able to both look forward but still acknowledge where gaming has come from. I mean, he is truly carrying the banner of the things that Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson really launched. And I just love the fact that Castles and Crusades was the last game system that Gary Gygax actually worked on, and it was during that interview of how much I thought maybe he collaborated a little bit with him. No, he literally worked on parts of it. I mean, they brought him on in order to not just give that that provenance to it, to Castles and Crusades, but also to give them the guidance to make it a system that will last. Very much like AD&D First Edition. It's a system that you can buy and play it for a lifetime. And just their design philosophy, as far as not dealing with editions, but doing print runs instead of editions, and only just cleaning up, whether it be formatting or adding, new updated art or a few mechanical changes here and there. But for the most part, that game system has, been unchanged and yet still moving forward since 2004. So that's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible stuff. So Lionel, your first RPG was Molve D&D Basic. Yeah, that was my first purchase. So that's for certain. And when I had to rebuy it, I was so happy to get one that was in the condition that I found, and still had the dice and everything like that. I paid like $100 for the box set, on eBay, and I was certainly happy to have gotten it in that condition, and and as fully intact as it was. Yes, it was a really, really cool interview, and I appreciate the praise for the interview. I wanted to let him talk as much as he possibly could about his game, and he kind of warned me ahead of time. He was like, "Oh, if you let me go, I'm just going to go," and I was like, "Yeah, I have no problem with just letting you go and just talk about your gaming experience and everything." So yeah, so I've been collecting CNC books, but I love that you really only need two to run the whole game. Yes, you really don't need the Castle Keeper's Guide. You can get away with just the Player's Handbook and the and the Monster Manual, or the Monster and Treasure Manual. But I'm kind of a completionist, and I think that most people are going to want to just get the core three, and you can roll with that. But you don't need to get them. Like I kind of made the mistake, although I'm perfectly happy with everything that I bought. Now that I realize that they're printings, not editions, you can get the most up-to-date one, and the covers on the most up-to-date ones are phenomenal. those homage covers for the AD&D first edition, Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and Dungeon Master's Guide. So that the homage to those covers are just unbelievable. Anyone that is a collector of tabletop role-playing games should get those 3 books. They're absolutely cool. So the Rankin Bass, The Hobbit animated movie back in the 70s and early 80s got me fascinated in the mature fantasy. Yeah, The Hobbit was a cool one. I mean, the Frodo of the Nine Fingers song just is like nails on a chalkboard for me. It's so cringy, but but it was really cool cartoon. I'm a bigger fan of the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings movies, but yeah, you have to have the Hobbit animated, which I do have, and that's a definite must-have for any Tolkien fan. So yeah, definitely cool cartoon. Yes, he was an awesome guy and a fellow veteran, and like I said, he and I virtually just like a mirror image of everything. Although he started playing about 2 years earlier than I did in D&D, but we joined the Army at the same time. He never said the Army. He said he joined the military in 1990, like I did. And we just kind of followed the same path. So and I'm a Northeasterner. I believe he is in, I want to say, Arkansas. So he's a Southerner, and they're it's not just a Midwestern hobby, which a lot of people might think of. I mean, it's still the center and it's the heart of the gaming, but it is broadly spread throughout the United States and the world. Yeah, let's see. Yes, the homage covers are awesome. Can't wait to see. Yeah, the Manual of the Planes. So they're coming out with the, their edition of the Manual of the Planes, and just looking forward to that cover, because that's the artist that he has that's working on it. And I'm sorry, his name is his name Baker. That's his favorite cover, from back in the day. And so he's going to do an homage to that cover. I can't wait to see it. I mean, that's going to be awesome. I'm still planning on running my first CNC campaign starting in a couple of months. Does CNC have their own world setting like Greyhawk? Yes, it does. It's called, there's a book called the Codex of Erde. It's AIHRDE. And there's also a player's handbook or player's guide to their world setting. And the player's guide is typically on sale. You can get that for like $9 or $10, $10, I think, hardcover from Tolor Games directly. So I recommend you go there and you definitely check that out. Yes. So yeah, Stephen does all the writing, like all the world setting writing and everything. So, he has some pretty cool, created words there, and some of them are a little bit hard to, pronounce. So you can definitely pronounce them however you wish, but I'm sure that there are proper ways to pronounce them. But I heard him say Erde, and so I was like, all right, thankfully I heard him say it, so now I know what to go with that. So let's see if I missed any. Yeah, CNC makes me feel like I'm playing D&D again. Yes, one of the best compliments that I've had from one of my players in my AD&D first edition group and it's not me. I think it's more the group of players that we have there. But he said, this is the first time that I feel like I'm playing AD&D like I did back in the day, and this was either Kelly or Alan that said this. Now Kelly Foote is one of my players, and he worked for TSR from 1982 to 1986, and he worked, I think, mostly with like Oriental Adventures, the actual adventure modules, as well as some of the other game products that they had outside of AD&D. But he frequently played with Gary and Gary's group, AD&D and other combinations of it. And so to have somebody like that in my group that can talk to and talk about well, this is the way that Gary actually ran his games, and which I don't run it the same way. Gary was much more of still playing like the wargaming kind of aspect of it, but just to hear someone that played with Gary and say, hey, this is the way that things were, and this is how he ran things, and and this just kind of like has that feel of gaming back then, with Gary was a huge compliment. And Alan, again, is another one of my players who also goes back in the day, wasn't working for TSR, but still was, saying, really felt like this was old school gameplay. And that's, that was a huge compliment. And again, I give all the credit to the group that I have, because they're just a great group of people, and we have a lot of fun. And yes, we do play Dungeons and Dragons for fun, and but that's no indicator that we're not dedicated. We've played 54 straight weeks in a row, never missing. And even though I'm on vacation this week, I'm coming back on a Friday, and we're going to make up for the week with probably either a Saturday, a Sunday, or a Monday game before we pick up on Tuesday our regular assigned games. So that way we can continue our unbroken chain of consecutive game sessions, on the week. If you can track down a copy of The Castle Keeper's Guide to the Haunted Highlands, it's a great book. All right, I will definitely check that out. Yeah, Decado is probably a much better source for the rules than I am. I am just getting caught up on reading many of the things that I've had. I mean, I've owned the Castles and Crusades, those first 2006 copies, for close to a year probably, and I just didn't get around to reading them until about 2 months ago, and now I'm totally hooked. Yes, so yeah, I think it's really important to I'm not going to say that, oh, it's a horrible thing that people are playing 5e. That's clearly not, where I think any of us in the OSR should be looking at, 5e players or modern players. I think that we should be looking to say, listen, if you're, it's great that you like that game, or that particular version of the game, but broaden your horizons, play other things, play other genres as well, because that is if you want to be an aficionado or an adherent to Gygaxian role playing. One of the things that Gary Gygax said repeatedly in his in his book on game mastery is that you have to run a variety of games. He was not someone who said, "Oh, you should be running just TSR games." He was a gamer's gamer. He was saying, get out there and play a whole bunch of stuff. You'll never master it if you're just sticking to my game, or if you're just sticking to this genre, or even if you're just sticking to this group of people that you're playing. He was a big proponent of getting out there and playing in a convention tournament type setting. He didn't believe you could master without having done that. Now, where I disagreed with Gary in his book was when he said the only way that you can truly become a master is if you publish. All right. I don't think that you have to be a game designer ultimately, or a publisher of your own adventures or game systems or whatever, in order to be a true master of it. But diversifying the games that you are playing is absolutely a must, I think, or certainly the games that you're running is absolutely a must to become a truly great game master. And there's no negative connotation to game master as opposed to dungeon master or whatever. One is licensed and trademarked, the other isn't. So that's why they're virtually interchangeable. And with a number of game systems, they have their own things, such as Castles and Crusades, which was actually, and I didn't actually ask Stephen about that, but I have heard that Gary Gygax's first campaign was entitled Castles and Crusades, just as Dave Arneson's was the Blackmore campaign. And so, but you're called a castle keeper in Castles and Crusades, as opposed to a dungeon master or a game master. And really, the original was called referee, which a lot of people aren't aware of. Is that was the original before there was a dungeon master. In Dungeons and Dragons, it was a referee, which again comes from Dave Arneson's influence. Yeah, I have never had this problem of keeping players. As a matter of fact, I have, ever since I've been running AD&D First Edition, even when I had up to 12 players ready to play, I still had a backlog of players that wanted to come in. And then when the number came down to 10, and then we have now at this point 8, I still have people that want to join in. And for my Castles and Crusades, it is easily a line of, yes, the 8 that I have currently playing in my AD&D, but I have like 3 or 4 others that want to come in. And I'm probably going to end up having to split it up because it's a big challenge, and I've done it for a while, but it's a big challenge to have that many player characters in one group, to have something that's almost double the regular size. Nope, me either. I ran 5e at FLGS Fridays and got to introduce 2 new players to the hobby. 5e is just not my favorite version of AD&D. I love introducing players to the hobby, though. Yeah, I mean, it's once you get them in, and then you start expanding and broadening their their range of games that they're playing, you'll see that they'll be willing to pick up along the way. Being myopic about what I played for games when I was young was a mistake. There are so many great games out there. Yes, there's, you should definitely not limit yourself to just one game. And I hear a lot of people say that they are, and it's not you're not going to grow just playing one game system, or playing one game system even a majority of your time is not a good way to grow. Um, it's fine if you're kind of, if you've been playing for 40 years and you've played dozens and dozens of games, and you kind of latch on to one particular game for each genre, then that's fine, but you should be running multiple things, and you are one of them. Yes, you're one of the. I definitely want to get you in on my game. And I have another. The OGGM wants to jump in on my Castles and Crusades game as well. So you guys are definitely, the welcome mat is out there. Definitely want you in. And, if I have to have 7 or 8 players, again, then I will certainly have 7 or 8 or even as many as 10 players. And I'm trying to work out how I can do that in the campaign. Probably go with, a pretty brutal kind of a pretty brutal kind of setup, where players might get knocked off, certainly in the early stages of the campaign as well. So we'll see. Your 5e campaign had 7 to 8 players, and yeah, that was a lot of work to juggle. Yeah, it is. It's kind of hard to get a really good balance of player personalities when you're having and like I said, I am so blessed, for lack of better way of saying it, with the players that I do have, because they're, they just clicked almost from the get-go, and they're, and that's because they're all experienced players too, and even when we had lesser experienced players, they got brought in so quickly that it just works out, it has worked out awesome now for over a year. So it's, tried and tested and true. It's all about the hook. Kids today watch Stranger Things. For me, I saw E.T. and wondered what all the kids were playing in Elliot's kitchen. Yeah, and you know what? Stranger Things, I'm going to give them a lot of credit for it. If you look at season 4, and in that either in that first episode or second episode, I forget when they were actually really doing the game session, they had 6 player characters in the group, and it came down to 2 of them. So you had 4 characters, high-level characters, because they were all 14 plus. And I know that because the girl, Sinclair's sister, had come in, and she was playing a 14th level rogue, even though it should have been a thief. She was playing a 14th level rogue. So even if, based on that, the rest of the player characters might have been, because a rogue would have been higher level anyway, they could have been anywhere from 12 to 14 range, I'm thinking. And the fact that 4 of the 6 were killed in the battle with Vecna means that, number one, you were definitely playing AD&D First Edition, and you don't have all of the training wheels that come with 5e. So if you're going to introduce players and tell them, listen, we're going to do something that, like you saw in Stranger Things, then really you should be showing them AD&D First Edition, and letting them experience that kind of gameplay. That's one of the things that Wizards of the Coast, I think, really screwed up when they've done their Stranger Things box set. It was the biggest disappointment, was that they own the rights to 1983 D&D. They own the rights to it. They get, they're still making money from selling it on drive-through or elsewhere, when they were doing those print on demands and those collector's editions and all of that stuff. They could make money off of it. It's just they're so petrified of anything that they're producing to challenge 5e. uh, that, and certainly not the older stuff, that they don't really push it, even though they're still making money from it. Um, and I think it's the fact that the older editions are going to bring more players to them if you expose it to them, and that's the bottom line, is that it's not, if they revamped the older editions, you would see something like Castles and Crusades, and that's why I think many of us, recently have been gravitating to that system. Yes, and yeah, I feel the same way. I'm so lucky as a dungeon master to have the players that I have. We do have a great time. Um, One of the new players I had on Friday was a young boy, and he was wearing a Hellfire Club T-shirt. Yes, so that's cool. I mean, that's the cool thing, about it, is that you know, Stranger Things, or even Critical Role, are going to bring a lot of people in, and then what you expose them to is really, what's going on at your individual table. That's what they're going to be exposed to, and um, I would prefer to emulate as much as I can that feeling from Stranger Things than from Critical Role, because we're not a bunch of voice actors and multiple takes and everything like that. I think that um, Stranger Things actually had a more authentic gameplay that you see there than what Critical Role has. Yeah, you know what, and that's a real weakness, and it is that you know, there's nothing wrong with having fantasy creatures be evil. It's really nonsense what they're doing, or at least coming up, trying to do with the cleansing the hobby, of the any darkness or edginess that it used to have, and that's not heroic fantasy. If it's, and I know a lot of times, we'll joke around and say it, but you know, you're not becoming an adventurer to be a barista in a coffee shop, and it's okay to have orcs being inherently evil, or as Decado puts out here, now we have lawful good kobolds, and to put these things in there to create something it's just unnecessary to do. It's okay to have a more combat oriented, good versus evil kind of dynamic going on. I mean, that was the foundation of the hobby. It's like they've forgotten what the hobby was and what Dungeons and Dragons was, and that's why many of us, myself, probably right at the forefront of this, is saying, this is not Dungeons and Dragons that they're producing now. This is something else. It's a different game, altogether. And it's unfortunate that many people come in thinking, oh, well, this is what Dungeons and Dragons is, and really have no connection, no experience with what true Dungeons and Dragons is. What we were playing back in the early to late 80s. But anyway, fantasy RPGs are their best when there is a dark world that draws heroes to action because there are things worth saving. Yes, there's things worth saving, and there are things worthy of destruction. Hey, if you want to, if you want to really encourage people to to want to wipe out orcs or kobolds or whatever. Just have them have a very fascist society, and they are the slave lords. They are this. You make them truly reprehensible and irredeemable. I mean, that was one of my responses to this whole thing about orcs being, orcs can be a variety of things. They can run the full spectrum from good to evil and everything like that. I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to make orcs so irredeemably evil and reprehensible that my players would only want to destroy them. And actually, in my campaign, they started to realize that, hey, if we don't wipe these things out, if we don't exterminate them from the caves of chaos, they're going to continue to harass, capture, kill, or worse, the surrounding civilian human population or even demi-human populations around the caves of chaos. And we're not doing our job. We were requested to quell this evil, and we're going to leave no orc women or child behind in order to bring about the next generation of orcs that someone else is going to have to come in and take care of. And so they literally started to, and it was like almost like on a dime. They just turned on a dime, and they became murder hobo-ish when it came to these I just lost my mind, not demi-humans, these just non-human entities, and whether it be orcs or hobgoblins, and I always portrayed hobgoblins even much worse than orcs were, but they were just wiping them out, and even if the paladin used to step away while he knew the rest of the party were slaughtering, because he just didn't think that it was, it was something that he didn't like to participate in himself, but he certainly wasn't going to condemn or question the morality of the other player characters for not having a problem with slitting the throats of captive orcs or of slaughtering off their family compounds filled with women and orc children and that kind of a thing. It was just, they were an evil that had to be exterminated. Watch the Shakal 5e Fantasy Avengers. It is a style of play you want to go, but it is not. Yeah, for you, it's not D&D, and it's not from any other. It's just there's too many safety, training wheels in it. Too many things. I've heard of, I've heard of people dealing hundreds of hit points of damage in a single attack, and it's like this crazy level of when you have that kind of stuff going on, and then every player has multiple death saves that you have to fail like 3 in a row in order for the character to die, and then even then when it does happen, they have almost resurrection at will, very readily available, is just kind of crazy to me. So let's see, any new comments? All right, so other things, I am going to wrap this up pretty soon. There's stuff that's been going on in the hobby. I'll get this one on this here. On the other end of the spectrum, people rarely appreciate how much of a destructive force lawful good is. There are few things as discriminatory as perfection, judged and found wanting. Yes, that's That's true. It's always been it's tough to play with a paladin in the group, but when the paladins played well, and I've actually played a lawful good cleric, and I feel that I played him well without him being too judgy. Um, but yeah, it's super challenging to play a lawful good character without them becoming, sanctimonious, judgmental pains in the ass. Just like it's really hard to play chaotic evil characters without them becoming chaotic stupid. So you have your two far flung, as far as on ends of the spectrum as you can get, and they're difficult to play well for good reason. They're tough. They're tough alignments to play. But that's why alignment is kind of important to have in the game system as well. So I was going to move on to just to kind of wrap this up. So uh, as always, we're coming out of the convention season, or we're kind of in the convention season, and I've been hearing a lot of stuff about conventions and safety at conventions, and I've heard some small conventions that went without a flaw, and yet nobody mentions it, like VentureCon, even though it was a tiny convention, only 26 or 27 people attended this first year of the convention, and yet they didn't have a single problem. And then you have something like Gen Con, where multiple allegations of all kinds of issues going on there, and it's just be mindful when you're going into a convention kind of setting that you know be mindful of health, and the fact that you're coming into contact with hundreds, or possibly even thousands of individuals. So and then anytime, as we see with Gen Con here, anytime that you mix alcohol with convention goers and everything, and you have people rooming with strangers that they don't know, anything can go awry. There's I used to say, like with like school trips, as a former teacher, I used to say, and as a union rep for my members, my member teachers, I used to tell them about going on a trip. I was like, there's 10 things that can go wrong, or 10 things that can happen. I'm sorry, 10 things that could happen on a school trip, and 9 of them will cost you your license. There's only one way a school trip could be successful, and that is if every single person got home on time, unharmed, in any possible way. All right. And that's the only time that you had a successful trip. It didn't even matter if they had fun or they learned anything or whatever. Just get everybody home on time, get everybody home unharmed. And conventions are kind of that same kind of a dynamic. It's like, if it becomes something where someone is harmed, then the whole thing is a freaking wash. It's a mess. All right. And so it's sad to hear about a gaming convention that just goes awry like that, but it seems to be something that's happening over and over again. So I would certainly recommend trying smaller conventions, and giving those a try, rather than these really huge conventions, especially ones that are over multiple days, and you're mixing in all other kinds of all other kinds of things. It's been a long day already. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap it up there. I love when someone else got deleted out. DM, let's see, what do we have here? Loved when someone else got deleted out. DM made it a mini sort of ritual. Hand me your character sheet, and he erased the name, then Um, yeah, I've heard of different things like that, doing things like that. You know what I did was I have in my binder that I have for my campaign, like the Hall of the Fallen, and I take all of the player characters that have either passed or players left the campaign for whatever reason. Their characters go into that, and then when we do like well, we already did our 1 year retrospective, but when we look back at the campaign over a long period of time, we'll go back and remember those characters and talk about those various characters. So everyone, thanks for popping in. Again, just testing this out to see how live streams work without any notice. And, glad that you've all been able to at least see the pop up and come in. And again, thanks for, coming in, participating on on the chat. Some really cool stuff out there on this chat. And I'll see how long this takes. I don't know if I'll be able to update anything or certainly share anything until it uploads. I'll see how quickly that happens. And then again, have a great week. Upcoming weekend. I always lose track of what the hell day it is. It's Sunday. That's right. So your upcoming week, and you all have a good one. Have a good night.